Before a man lets himself fall in love, he will test you, often without realizing he's doing it, not with a checklist, not with a plan, but with the unconscious instincts of someone trying to protect his deepest vulnerabilities. Love, for a man, is not a casual step. It's a surrender, a relinquishing of pride, control, and certainty. And before he takes that risk, he needs to know something critical. Can you hold your center when he can't find his? This is not about manipulation. It's about survival. It's about determining whether the woman beside him is merely attracted to his potential or deeply rooted in her own. And make no mistake, if you chase him when he pulls back, if you silence yourself to keep the peace, if you trade authenticity for approval, you're not passing his test. You're confirming his fear that love will cost him his freedom, not offer him peace. So he will push, he will pause, he will disappear and reappear, not to hurt you, but to measure what remains when the mask drops. And what he's looking for isn't perfection. It's truth, strength, integrity, something real in a world built on illusions. A man's decision to fall in love is rarely immediate, and it's almost never purely emotional. There's something deeper at work, an instinctive, often unconscious need to evaluate the emotional landscape of the woman he's drawn to. When a man begins to feel himself drawn toward intimacy and vulnerability, he doesn't simply leap into it. Instead, he often begins to test the waters. Not maliciously, not manipulatively, but biologically and psychologically, almost like a survival reflex. His testing isn't about playing games, it's about answering an unspoken question. Can I trust you with the most fragile parts of me? Before he allows love to take hold, he will look, intentionally or not, for signs of emotional safety. And often that looks like testing your limits, your boundaries, your patience, and your self-concept. These tests are not always verbal or even obvious. They show up in subtle inconsistencies. He might become distant after a moment of deep connection just to see if you chase. He might share something vulnerable and then go cold, waiting to see if you panic or hold your ground. These behaviors, though often confusing, are expressions of his internal struggle between desire and fear. He wants to believe in you, but he also wants to make sure you can handle the weight of his love should he choose to offer it. He might not know that he's doing it, but the mechanism is evolutionary. He's assessing your strength, your ability to hold emotional space without losing yourself in it. What many women mistake for mixed signals or hot and cold behavior is often a man wrestling with his own need for assurance, not the kind that comes from flattery or compliance, but the kind that emerges when he senses that your identity isn't contingent on his attention. He wants to see that you are whole before he offers you his broken pieces. He tests to learn what's behind the attraction, whether your interest is situational or substantial, whether your affection will remain when the charm fades and the uncertainty grows. Because love, real love, terrifies a man who has known loss, betrayal, or failure. And so, before he lets himself fall, he will look for evidence that you're not just present, but anchored. The test might come in the form of a challenge. He might provoke you, not out of malice, but to see how you respond when things don't go your way. He might observe how you react when your needs aren't met immediately, or when he fails to live up to your ideal. In those moments, he's not looking for perfection in you. He's looking for stability, emotional endurance, and honesty. A man can be enamored by beauty, charisma, and kindness, but what makes him stay, what allows him to love, is the realization that he can be himself without being judged, manipulated, or reduced. And until he sees that you can remain composed in the face of uncertainty, he won't trust his heart in your hands. You might never hear him say it aloud, but every test asks the same question: will you remain who you are when I withdraw? And if the answer is yes, if you don't chase, fold, or perform, you become someone he can finally exhale around. Because now he knows you won't collapse under the pressure of his vulnerability. That's when the guard drops. That's when the love begins. And that's when the tests quietly end. He's not testing you to see you fail. He's testing to understand what you're built on. When a man begins to care for a woman in a real and lasting way, there is an inner shift that shakes the foundation of his autonomy. Suddenly, he's not just operating as an individual anymore. His decisions, his identity, even his emotional world are being reshaped by the presence of someone else. And that kind of shift doesn't come without fear. He begins to realize that love, in its purest form, makes him vulnerable. It's not about romance, it's about exposure. Loving you means handing over parts of himself that even he hasn't fully figured out. And before he does that, he needs to know that you're not just emotionally available, but emotionally solid. This is why he tests, not to manipulate, not to control, but to confirm your foundation. You see, most people can play a part for a little while. They can say the right words, act agreeable, nod at all the correct moments. But when life gets hard, when emotions rise, when pressure builds, when things get messy, what's really inside someone gets revealed. And that's what he wants to see. Not the version of you that's curated for date nights or filtered through affection, but the version of you that shows up under stress. Will you blame him when you're frustrated? Will you attack his masculinity when you're angry? Will you become passive-aggressive when your needs aren't instantly met? Or will you respond with maturity, clarity, and patience, even when it's uncomfortable? He's not testing to see if you're easy to love. He's testing to see if you're safe to love. There's a difference. Being easy to love means you're pleasing, fun, exciting. Being safe to love means you have the strength to be honest, the depth to be stable, and the courage to hold boundaries, even with him. This is what he's really looking for when he pulls back, when he challenges your emotions, when he says something careless just to see how you'll respond. He's not asking for perfection. He's asking for proof. Proof that your love isn't skin deep. Proof that you won't fold at the first sign of conflict. Proof that you're someone he can count on when the facade of control inevitably cracks. And here's the paradox. The more deeply he feels for you, the more intensely he'll test. Because now there's something at stake. Now his heart is involved, and the moment a man senses the possibility of emotional dependency, he looks for signs that he won't regret letting go of his defenses. That's when the testing becomes more subtle, but more telling. He might question your opinions, not to argue, but to see if you can think for yourself. He might withdraw emotionally for a short time, not to punish you, but to observe whether you spiral or stay composed. These are not games. These are instinctual reactions to the rising pressure of emotional exposure. Ultimately, he's not asking whether you love him. He's asking whether your love can survive the messiness of real life, disagreements, disappointments, insecurity, silence. He's watching, not with a cruel eye, but with a cautious heart, because he knows what it costs to fall and be caught by someone unprepared. And before he takes that step, he wants to see that the ground beneath him is firm. Your emotional clarity, your unwavering self-respect, your refusal to betray yourself just to win him over. That's what tells him you're the real thing, and that's what makes him ready to risk everything. How you respond to a man's emotional distance, criticism, or silence tells him more than your words ever could. You might think the relationship is built in the moments of affection, the closeness, the shared experiences, but for a man, the defining moments often happen in discomfort, when things aren't flowing, when connection is disrupted, when uncertainty enters the space between you. That's when he watches the closest, not because he's cold or detached, but because that's when your core reveals itself. When he becomes distant, he isn't always trying to hurt you. Sometimes he's pulling away to see what you'll do with the space. Will you panic and chase? Will you collapse into fear and demand reassurance? Or will you stay cantered, grounded, aware of your own worth regardless of his behavior? This is not a conscious strategy for most men. They don't sit down and decide to pull away to test you. It's often instinctual, driven by their own uncertainty, their fear of being consumed, or the realization that they're getting emotionally invested in something that could either elevate them or devastate them. When that realization hits, a man's default mechanism is withdrawal. And in that withdrawal, he observes, he doesn't want to see perfection. He wants to see how real you are when the connection isn't convenient. Can you handle emotional ambiguity without trying to control it? Can you sit in the discomfort without losing your balance? Similarly, when a man offers criticism, not the toxic kind rooted in disrespect, but the kind that reveals his hesitations, he's not just speaking to be heard. He's communicating a fear, a value, or a boundary. And how you respond matters. Do you become defensive? Do you collapse into guilt or overcompensate to win him back? Or do you remain calm, open, and still rooted in who you are? A man doesn't just listen to your reaction. He watches how you carry yourself in that moment. Are you emotionally fragile or emotionally sovereign? Can you take feedback without losing dignity? And then there's silence, one of the most powerful and misunderstood tests of all. When a man goes quiet, not for days on end, not in neglect, but in a moment of reflection, he's trying to reset. Sometimes it's a matter of overstimulation, sometimes confusion, sometimes fear, but in that pause, he's not just figuring himself out. He's watching how you relate to the unknown. Do you rush in to fill the silence? Do you bombard him with questions and accusations? Or do you allow space to breathe without making it mean something about your worth? Many women don't realize that these moments, his distance, his critique, his silence, are where the relationship is actually being defined, not in the good times, but in the uncertain ones. These are the moments that answer the question he might not even know he's asking. If I show you my doubt, will you weaponize it? If I need space, will you take it personally? If I challenge you, will you abandon yourself to please me? The woman who can stay emotionally steady in those moments earns something deeper than affection. She earns his respect, and in many cases, his love, because now he sees something that's rare. He sees someone who doesn't crumble under pressure, someone who isn't living from a place of lack or fear. And that's the kind of woman he feels safe to fall in love with, not because she made him feel good, but because she made him feel seen, even when things weren't easy. One of the most profound truths a woman must understand in a relationship is this: if you compromise your values to win a man, you've already lost the foundation of respect that love is built on. It doesn't matter how much he says he cares, how much he's drawn to you, or how intensely the chemistry burns. If a man sees that you're willing to betray your own standards just to keep him close, he may enjoy the attention in the short term, but over time he will begin to lose respect for you. And once that respect fades, so does the possibility of a meaningful connection. What starts as affection turns into tolerance. What began with admiration ends with indifference, because deep down, a man can't love a woman he doesn't respect, and he can't respect a woman who doesn't respect herself. Many women are conditioned to believe that being agreeable, flexible, and accommodating will earn them love. They believe that sacrificing their needs, tolerating disrespect, or bending their boundaries is the price they must pay to keep a man interested. But this is not love. This is self-abandonment. And a man, whether he admits it or not, is always watching for this. Not because he wants to take advantage of you, but because he wants to see if you'll stay grounded in who you are when your desire for connection is on the line. That's the test. That's the moment that tells him everything. When he pushes your boundary, even subtly, and sees you hold firm, he feels something rare: safety. Not comfort, not convenience, safety. Emotional safety in a woman who knows herself, who values herself, and who won't contort to avoid rejection. When you let things slide that make you uncomfortable, when you stay silent to keep the peace, when you laugh off comments that actually cut deep, you're teaching him that your love comes at the cost of your integrity. And while he might enjoy the freedom that gives him in the short term, he will slowly begin to see you as someone who cannot be trusted to protect herself, and therefore cannot be fully trusted to protect him either. Because here's the truth: a woman who doesn't honor her own boundaries cannot fully honor his either. Love becomes unstable when one person is performing instead of living authentically. This doesn't mean being rigid or cold. It means being clear. It means being able to say, I care about you deeply, but I won't betray myself just to stay close to you. That kind of strength is magnetic. It earns a man's respect in ways that beauty or charm never could, because when a man is deciding whether or not to fall in love, real love, he's not just asking whether you love him. He's asking whether he can trust the version of you he sees when pressure enters the room. Will you hold your ground when he tests your patience, your emotional control, your values, or will you shift, bend, and lose yourself in hopes of keeping his interest? The woman who wins his heart isn't the one who tries to avoid the tests. It's the one who passes them by refusing to be anything less than who she truly is. She understands that love built on compromise of values is not love, it's dependency. And she knows that if a man only stays because she diluted her standards, then what she has isn't love, it's fear dressed in the costume of affection. Real love demands courage. And the moment you stand firm in who you are, even when it risks losing him, is the moment he begins to truly see your worth. A man doesn't fall in love because a woman chases him, pleases him, or tries to prove her worth. He falls in love when he feels emotionally safe in her presence, not coddled, not worshipped, but deeply secure in her strength. That's the part most people miss. It's not the softness of her words or the sweetness of her gestures that ultimately wins him over. It's the way she stands rooted in her self-respect. A man may be impressed by beauty, attracted to charm, or even captivated by a woman's nurturing presence. But if those qualities exist without a backbone, without boundaries, without a deep and visible sense of identity, the admiration eventually fades. What he craves, whether he can articulate it or not, is a woman who won't lose herself in him, because that's where the real power lies, not in what you do for him, but in how unwavering you are in being who you are. When a man senses that your mood doesn't depend on his attention, that your happiness doesn't require his approval, and that your love is given freely but not at the expense of your values, he experiences something rare, emotional gravity. That's when he begins to orbit you, not because you asked him to, but because he recognizes that you're not standing there trying to win him. You're already whole, already complete, and anything he brings to your life is a bonus, not a rescue. That's where his feelings shift from attraction to attachment, from curiosity to commitment. He doesn't want to lead someone he has to carry emotionally. He wants a partner, not a project. The irony is that many women think they need to be more available, more agreeable, more self-sacrificing to earn love. But in doing so, they accidentally erase the very traits that make a man feel anchored. He doesn't fall for perfection. He falls for presence. And presence requires that you know where you end and where he begins, that you can say no without guilt, that you can express your needs without apology, that you can be loving without being submissive. He falls in love with the part of you that doesn't need him, but chooses him. That's what separates love from dependency, and men know the difference, even if they don't say it out loud. When he sees that your boundaries are consistent, when he sees that your identity doesn't shift to accommodate him, when he feels that your peace can't be easily disturbed by his distance or moods, he relaxes. He lets go of the performance. He stops testing. Why? Because now he knows that loving you won't mean losing himself. It won't mean carrying your emotional weight or managing your self-esteem. It will mean meeting you as an equal. And for a man who's grown weary of superficial connections or exhausting dynamics, that kind of emotional equilibrium is magnetic. That's when he allows himself to feel, to open, to fall, not because he's overwhelmed by your beauty or your devotion, but because he finally sees someone who is solid, someone he can rely on, someone who won't collapse if things get hard. When he knows that you won't trade your truth for his affection, he begins to trust your love. And when a man trusts your love, he no longer sees you as an option. He sees you as a home, and that is when he falls, fully and without restraint.